The snow outside had been falling since midnight, blanketing our neighborhood in soft white silence. Inside the Carter household, the tree glowed with strings of lights and ornaments collected over the years, each one polished and perfectly placed by my mother, Vivian. She always demanded perfection for appearances, though never for the sake of warmth. I stood near the edge of the living room, arms folded, watching as my younger sister, Sabrina, bounced on her heels in her silk pajamas. She was always the star of mornings like these, and she knew it. Her smile stretched wide, as though the entire world belonged to her. And in this house, it usually did. "Go on, Sabrina," my father, Thomas, said proudly. His voice carried the same weight of favoritism I had heard my entire life. "Check the driveway," Sabrina squealed, throwing on her slippers and racing to the front door. The rest of the family followed, and I lingered behind, my stomach sinking with a familiar ache. The cold air rushed in as she pushed the door wide, and there it was, parked in the drive, gleaming under the pale December sky, a brand new BMW with a giant red bow across the hood. Sabrina screamed, hands covering her mouth, before she launched herself into our father's arms. "Daddy, you didn't! Oh my God, you didn't!" He laughed, lifting her off her feet. "Of course I did. Nothing less for my girl." Everyone clapped, cheered, and fussed over her, circling the car as if it were some holy relic. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, whispering about how proud she was. Cousins pulled out their phones to record videos. And me, I stood there, invisible as always. It wasn't jealousy, not anymore. I had grown too used to this game to feel that sharp sting. What I felt instead was numbness. A hollow recognition that once again, I was the afterthought. Finally, my mother turned her gaze toward me. "Amelia," she said briskly, as though remembering she had left a chore undone. "We didn't forget you. Your gifts under the tree." I walked back into the living room. The box was small, carelessly wrapped, wedged between piles of discarded ribbon. I peeled back the paper to find a plain piggy bank. Cheap plastic, the kind you'd give a child. Inside rattled a single $2 bill. $2. I held it in my hand, staring at the green ink as laughter carried from the driveway. It wasn't the money that broke me. It was the message. To them, I was worth less than pocket change. My mother appeared in the doorway, her lips pursed in a sharp smile. "Don't look so serious, Amelia. It's practical. You're always worried about savings, aren't you?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. "You gave her a car and gave me $2. Vivian's eyes narrowed, her voice lowering so only I could hear. "Don't make this about you. It's Sabrina's day. It's always been Sabrina's day. Don't ruin it." Then, she swept back outside, leaving me standing there in the glow of the Christmas tree, the $2 bill crumpled in my hand. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not in sadness, but in resolve. I realized that night I couldn't stay here anymore. Not in this house, not in this family where my worth had been measured, dismissed, and reduced to scraps. And though no one knew it yet, the decision had already been made. By the time the clock struck 2 in the morning, I would be gone. The house was silent at last. Laughter, clinking glasses, and Sabrina's squeals of delight had faded into sleep. Even the glow of the Christmas tree looked tired, its ornaments reflecting back a hollow kind of cheer. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the piggy bank on the nightstand. That cheap piece of plastic with its pathetic $2 bill had become more than a gift. It was a mirror reflecting 34 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and forgotten. The BMW still sat in the driveway, its red bow drooping slightly in the cold. I imagined Sabrina asleep in her room, probably dreaming of speeding down highways, windows down, the golden child basking in the wind of favoritism. I pressed my palms against my eyes, willing away the sting of tears. Crying had never changed anything. What I needed now wasn't tears. It was action. The clock ticked past 1. I grabbed the small duffel bag I had kept hidden in my closet. Not out of foresight, but because a part of me had always known this day would come. I packed light. A few changes of clothes, the journals that had carried my secrets for years, and the photograph of me and Olivia Bennett, my best friend, my safe place, taken back in college. I zipped the bag slowly, every sound amplified in the stillness. Down the hall, I paused outside Sabrina's door. Her soft snoring seeped through, the kind of sleep that came easily when the world had always been handed to you. For a moment, bitterness crept in. Then I let it go. This wasn't about her, it was about me. At my parents' door, I stopped again. I imagined Vivian sprawled in her silk robe, Thomas snoring lightly beside her. For years, they had treated me like the spare, the background character in my own life. And yet, leaving still hurt. I pressed my hand to the wooden frame. "Goodbye," I whispered, so soft even I barely heard it. When the clock struck 2, I stepped outside. The air bit against my skin, sharp and clean. My breath puffed in front of me as I crossed the snow-covered yard. The BMW gleamed under the moonlight like a cruel monument to everything I was leaving behind. I didn't look back. Sliding into my old beat-up sedan, I gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands. For a moment, I sat frozen, the weight of decades pressing against me. Could I really do this? Could I really leave everything? Even the scraps I'd been given. The answer came as I started the engine. The sound wasn't pretty. The car coughed and rattled, nothing like the purr of the BMW in the driveway. But it moved. And for the first time, I realized I could too. The tires crunched over the snow as I pulled away from the Carter house, the glow of the Christmas lights shrinking in my rearview mirror until they were nothing more than distant specks. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet. All I knew was that I was free. And in that silence, the kind that wasn't suffocating but liberating, I promised myself something. This was the last Christmas I would ever spend being treated like nothing. The next time they saw me, if they ever did, I would no longer be the forgotten daughter. I would be Amelia Carter, and I would make sure they never forgot my name again. The sun had barely risen when I pulled into the quiet neighborhood where Olivia Bennett lived. My car groaned in protest after hours on the road, but it had carried me farther than I had ever dared to imagine. Olivia had always said her home was my home. She'd proven it a dozen times before, but I had never taken her up on it, not fully, not until now. I parked along the curb and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the small townhouse with its faded blue shutters. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery across the street drifted in through the cracked window. It was ordinary, comforting, everything my parents' house had never been. By the time I climbed the porch steps, my knees were trembling. I knocked softly, half expecting her not to hear. But within seconds, the door swung open, and there she was, Amelia. Olivia's eyes widened as she took me in. The duffel bag slung over my shoulder, the exhaustion etched into my face. The concern melted into understanding almost instantly. Without another word, she pulled me inside and wrapped me in a hug so tight it nearly undid me. I hadn't cried when I left. I hadn't cried when I drove away from the BMW and the laughter. But now, in her arms, the tears came hard and fast. "They gave her a car," I choked out. "And me? $2. Olivia pulled back, staring into my eyes as if weighing the truth of my words. When she saw I wasn't exaggerating, her face hardened. "That's it? You're not going back there. Not ever," I nodded. "I know." She didn't press for details. She didn't demand explanations. She just led me to the couch, wrapped me in a blanket, and made tea. It was the kind of care that came without conditions, a foreign concept to me, but one I clung to now. For the first time in years, I slept deeply that night, the kind of sleep that comes when you know you're finally safe. The weeks that followed were a blur of adjustment. I found a small job at a local publishing office, just enough to keep myself busy and remind me that I could stand on my own feet. Olivia checked in constantly, reminding me to eat, to rest, to breathe. But the real turning point came the day she handed me a business card. "I made an appointment for you," she said, placing the card in my hand. "Dr. Jonathan Reed, licensed therapist." I hesitated. Therapy had always been dismissed in my family. Another sign of weakness. Another indulgence reserved for people who couldn't handle life. But maybe, just maybe, it was what I needed. The first session was awkward. Dr. Reed's office was quiet, lined with books and the faint scent of pine. He sat across from me, kind-eyed and patient, waiting. I didn't know where to start, so I began at the only place that made sense. "They gave her a BMW," I said softly. "And me, $2. The words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. He didn't flinch. He didn't dismiss. He simply nodded, as if confirming that yes, what I had endured mattered. By the end of that session, something shifted inside me. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight alone. One night, weeks later, I sat with Olivia on the balcony, city lights stretching in the distance. She handed me a mug of cocoa, her eyes curious. "So," she asked, "what now?" I stared at the horizon, the world wide open in front of me. For years, my life had been confined to the Carter household, defined by their judgment. But now, sitting under the night sky with freedom in my chest, I felt a spark of possibility. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I know this much. Whatever comes next, it's mine. Not theirs." And for the first time in 34 years, that thought didn't terrify me. It set me free. The weeks turned into months, and with each sunrise, I felt a little more like myself. Or maybe for the first time, like someone new. Therapy wasn't magic, but it gave me tools, words for feelings I had spent years swallowing. Dr. Reed never judged, never rushed. He let me unravel the knots of my childhood one thread at a time. I think I told him one session, twisting the hem of my sleeve. I spent my whole life trying to be seen, and no matter what I did, it was never enough. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded calmly. "And what if the problem wasn't you, Amelia? What if the problem was that your parents couldn't see anyone beyond the image they wanted?" That thought stayed with me long after I left his office. For years, I believed I was the flaw. But slowly, I began to see the truth. The flaw had never been mine. Living with Olivia gave me the space to breathe again. Her home was small but filled with laughter, books, and the kind of warmth that didn't need to be performed for guests. Some evenings we cooked pasta together, others we sprawled on the couch with wine, watching old movies until our sides hurt from laughing. "See," she said one night, tossing popcorn at me. "You don't need them. You've got family right here," and she was right. The ache in my chest lessened a little more each day. Work at the publishing office was steady, nothing glamorous, but I liked it. Sorting manuscripts, proofreading chapters. It was quiet, methodical, and for once, mine. No one compared me to Sabrina. No one sneered at my choices. I was simply Amelia, and that was enough. Spring brought with it new light. The city seemed to hum with possibility. Flowers blooming in window boxes, laughter spilling from open cafes. One Saturday, Olivia convinced me to join a pottery class downtown. "Come on," she teased, tugging at my sleeve. "It's either that or you spend another weekend organizing books by spine color." I rolled my eyes, but agreed. And somewhere between the spinning clay and the soft hum of music in the studio, I felt something I hadn't in years: joy. My hands, clumsy at first, began shaping bowls and mugs, each imperfect but mine. One evening, as I carefully carried a wobbly vase to the drying shelf, a voice beside me said, "Not bad for a beginner." I turned to see a man about my age, sleeves rolled up, clay streaked on his forearms. His smile was easy, warm. "I'm Ethan," he said. "Amelia," I replied, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. We laughed about our disasters, his mug with 2 handles, my lopsided vase. It was light, unforced, nothing like the strained conversations I was used to at the Carter dinner table. By the end of the class, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. And for once, Instead of hesitating or overthinking, I said yes. That night, sitting on Olivia's balcony with the city lights flickering below, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Piece by piece, I was building a life that wasn't defined by cruelty or neglect. A life that belonged entirely to me. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Our first coffee date was simple. No fancy reservations, no showy gestures. Just a small cafe tucked on the corner of a busy street, with the smell of roasted beans curling through the air and the sound of quiet jazz in the background. Ethan arrived carrying 2 mugs, one topped with extra foam. "You look like a cappuccino kind of person," he said, sliding it across the table. I smiled, surprised by the thoughtfulness. "I am." "How did you know?" He shrugged lightly, his grin easy. "Lucky guess." We talked for hours, about nothing and everything. His work as an architect designing sustainable homes, my role at the publishing office, books we loved, movies we hated. With him, there were no loaded questions, no barbed comments hidden behind smiles, just conversation that flowed like water. When we stepped outside, the air was cool against my cheeks. Ethan walked me to my car, pausing before I opened the door. "I'd like to see you again," he said, his voice steady. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't doubt that he meant it. The weeks that followed were filled with small, quiet joys. Pottery classes where our hands brushed against wet. Clay, evenings spent exploring the city, mornings where he brought fresh bagels to Olivia's place just because. One night, after a long walk along the river, we sat on a bench watching the water glisten under the city lights. Ethan turned to me, his expression serious. "You ever talk about your family?" he asked gently. The question hit like a stone in my chest. For a moment, I considered brushing it off, but something in his eyes, patient, kind, made me want to tell the truth. "They've never really seen me," I said finally. Everything was always about Sabrina. The car, the praise, the attention. I was just there. He didn't rush to respond. He didn't try to fix it or offer empty comfort. He simply reached for my hand, holding it steady. "You deserve better," he said quietly, "and not just from them. From everyone." The words settled over me like a balm. No one had ever said them to me before, not my parents, not anyone. Hearing them now, I felt something loosen inside, a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Even Olivia noticed the change. One evening, she smirked as I returned from another night out. "You're glowing," she teased, handing me a glass of wine. "So when's the wedding?" "Olivia," I laughed, shaking my head. "It's not like that," she raised an eyebrow. "Not yet." I rolled my eyes, but deep down, her words stirred something I wasn't ready to admit. Hope. Therapy sessions with Dr. Reed grew lighter too. Instead of only unwrapping old wounds, I found myself talking about pottery, about work, about Ethan. "It sounds like you're starting to find balance, Doctor," Reed said one afternoon. "I think I am," I admitted. "For once, I don't feel like I'm just surviving. I'm actually happy." And though the old shadows still lingered, happiness felt like a rebellion of its own. One night, as Ethan dropped me off outside Olivia's townhouse, he hesitated before speaking. "You know," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I don't care what your family thinks of you. But I wish they could see the woman I see." I swallowed hard, emotions tightening my throat. "What woman is that?" His gaze held mine. "Strong, brave, worth everything." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was electric, steady, a promise I hadn't dared to hope for. And as I walked inside, heart pounding, I realized something I never thought I'd feel again. I was falling in love. It had been nearly a year since I left the Carter household. A year of silence, a year of healing, a year of learning how to live without waiting for their approval. Life was finally steady. Work at the publishing office was going well. Ethan and I were seeing more of each other. and Olivia had practically become my sister in every way that mattered. And then, one quiet Sunday morning, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find my mother, standing there, Vivian Carter in her tailored coat, pearl earrings shining even in the pale daylight, lips painted a sharp red. She looked exactly as I remembered her, composed, cold, untouchable. For a moment, I froze. The last time I had seen her, she had handed me a piggy bank with a $2 bill inside. And now here she was standing on Olivia's doorstep as if nothing had ever happened. "Amelia," she said smoothly, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "You look, well." The words were meant to sound like a compliment, but they landed like a judgment. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Her expression didn't falter. "We'd like you to come home. It's time to put this silliness behind us. As if decades of neglect and cruelty were nothing but a childish tantrum. "I don't think so," I replied, starting to close the door. But she slid her hand against it, her nails clicking against the wood. "Amelia, listen to me. Your father isn't doing well. And Sabrina, she needs you. She's under so much stress planning her engagement party." I almost laughed. Of course it was about Sabrina. It was always about Sabrina. "Vivian," I said, dropping the pretense of calling her mom, "I don't owe any of you anything." Her face stiffened, a crack appearing in the mask she wore so carefully. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat your family." Family. The word made my chest tighten. Family wasn't supposed to feel like a chain. Behind me, Olivia appeared, arms crossed. "You heard her," she said firmly. "She's not interested." Vivian's eyes flicked toward Olivia, narrowing with disdain, but she didn't argue. Instead, she leaned closer to me, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't forget who you are, Amelia. You'll always be a Carter, and one day you'll regret turning your back on us." With that, she turned on her heel and walked down the steps, heels clicking against the pavement, leaving behind the same chill she always carried. That night, I sat with Ethan at the pottery studio, my hands trembling as I shaped the clay. "They want me to come back," I whispered, as if nothing ever happened. He looked at me, steady and calm. "And what do you want?" The question lingered in the air, heavier than the clay in my hands. "I want to be free of them," I said finally. "Truly free." He reached over, steadying my shaking hands with his. "Then that's what you'll be. No one gets to define you but you." For days afterward, Vivian's words echoed in my head. "Don't forget who you are," but she was wrong. For the first time in my life, I wasn't forgetting. I was remembering who I was supposed to be all along. And if my family thought they could drag me back into their orbit, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The envelope sat on Olivia's kitchen counter, heavy cream, paper embossed with gold lettering. I hadn't opened it yet, but I didn't need to. I already knew what it was. "Go on," Olivia urged, sipping her coffee. "You've been staring at it for 10 minutes. With a sigh, I broke the seal. Inside was a wedding invitation, all calligraphy and flourish. "Lily Carter and Matthew Hayes request the honor of your presence." I blinked at the names. My cousin Lily. The one who had been kind to me even in childhood. Sneaking me cookies when my parents punished me. Offering small kindnesses when no one else bothered. She was getting married. And she wanted me there. Olivia raised an eyebrow as I handed her the card. "Well, this could be interesting." Interesting was one word for it. Terrifying was another. Because I knew who else would be there. Vivian, Thomas, and of course Sabrina, center stage, as always. Probably dressed in a gown that screamed for attention, even though it wasn't her day. Part of me wanted to burn the invitation, to avoid the confrontation altogether. But another part, a stronger part, whispered that this was my chance. My parents had taken every opportunity to belittle me in private, to make me feel small behind closed doors. But in public, in front of the entire family, that was different. Maybe it was time they saw me for who I really was. Ethan listened patiently as I explained my dilemma later that evening, We sat in the pottery studio, our hands resting idly on unfinished pieces of clay. "So what are you thinking?" he asked. I bit my lip. "If I go, it'll be a war. I know them. They'll expect me to sit quietly, smile politely, and let Sabrina shine. But I can't do that anymore." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then don't. Go. Show them you're not afraid. And if things get ugly," his hand covered mine, "you won't be standing alone." The certainty in his voice steadied me. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of preparation, not for the ceremony itself, but for the mental battle I knew awaited. Therapy sessions with Dr. Reed became more focused. "They can't take your power unless you give it to them," he reminded me. "If you walk into that room already knowing your worth, nothing they say can strip it from you." I repeated those words to myself like a mantra. On the morning of the wedding, Olivia helped me zip up a deep emerald green dress. Simple but elegant. The same color as the one I wore when I first began rebuilding my life. "Perfect," she said, adjusting the neckline. "You look like someone they won't be able to ignore." For once, I believed her. When Ethan picked me up, his eyes softened. "You're stunning," he said, offering his arm. And as we drove to the grand hall where Lily's wedding would take place, I felt the tremor of nerves in my stomach, but also something stronger. Resolve. This wasn't just a wedding. It was the stage I had been waiting for, the moment where I would no longer be the girl with the $2 gift. I was Amelia Carter, and this time they would have no choice but to see me. The hall shimmered with chandeliers, the light bouncing off crystal glasses and golden accents. Guests murmured in clusters, laughter mingling with the music of a string quartet. Everything about Lily's wedding radiated elegance. I walked in with Ethan at my side, Olivia trailing close behind us. For the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten shadow at a family gathering. My emerald green dress caught the light, and when heads turned, I didn't shrink. I stood tall. "Amelia," Lily rushed over, radiant in her gown, cheeks flushed with excitement. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I felt the warmth of family, the kind I had always longed for. "I'm so glad you came." Her voice cracked with sincerity, and I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. But of course, the moment couldn't last. Across the hall, I saw them, my parents. Vivian's lips tightened as her eyes swept over me, her expression sharp as glass. Thomas stood stiffly at her side, his pride reserved only for the daughter who wasn't me. And Sabrina sauntered up moments later, draped in a sequined dress that sparkled as if it were her day. "Well, look who decided to show up," she drawled, her smile sweet and poisonous. "I didn't think you'd have the nerve." Ethan's hand at my back steadied me, but I didn't flinch. "It's Lily's wedding." "I came to celebrate her." Vivian's voice cut in, smooth and biting. "Just don't cause a scene, Amelia." "Tonight isn't about you." For a second, the old instinct to shrink back flared. The habit of silence drilled into me for decades. But then I caught Lily's smile across the room, the relief in her eyes at my presence. No, I wouldn't disappear this time. Dinner began, long tables stretching under glittering lights. Toasts were given, laughter rising in bursts. And yet, at our table, tension simmered. "So," Thomas began, swirling his wine. "Still working that little office job?" His tone made the word little sound like dirt. "Yes," I answered evenly. "And I'm proud of it." Sabrina smirked, twirling her fork. "Well, not everyone can be successful. Some of us just find our place higher up." Olivia bristled beside me, but I laid a hand on hers under the table. I didn't need her to fight for me, not tonight. Vivian leaned forward, her smile thin. "You could have had more, Amelia, if you'd just listened. You walked away from your family, and for what? Independence? Don't fool yourself. You'll regret it." I met her gaze, my voice steady. "The only thing I regret is wasting so many years trying to please you." The words silenced the table. For the first time in my life, I watched my mother blink, caught off guard, unsure. Later, as music filled the hall and couples swayed on the dance floor, I stood by the balcony doors, breathing in the night air. Ethan slipped beside me. "You did well," he said softly. "They'll come at me harder before the night's over," I admitted. "They can't stand losing control." He smiled faintly. "Then let them try. You've already won more than they'll ever admit." I looked back into the hall, at Vivian's rigid posture, at Thomas's quiet scowl, at Sabrina holding court like a queen in borrowed light. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one they thought would never stand tall. But tonight was different. Tonight was only the beginning. The clinking of a glass echoed through the hall as the best man gave his toast, light-hearted stories drawing laughter from every corner. Then Lily's maid of honor spoke, her voice trembling with emotion, and tears welled in the bride's eyes. It was beautiful, heartfelt, genuine. And then it was Thomas who rose to his feet. "I'd like to say a few words," he announced, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. A hush fell, and I felt the familiar dread coil in my stomach. At first, his speech was harmless enough. Praises for Lily, pride in her future, warm wishes for Matthew. But then, as if unable to resist, he turned his gaze toward me. "It's wonderful to see all our family together tonight," he said, his tone edged with poison. "Even Amelia managed to join us. We weren't sure she'd make it, given her busy little life." Laughter rippled at some tables, though uneasy. My cheeks burned, but I kept my head high. Sabrina chimed in from her seat, her voice carrying, "Yes, Amelia, it's so good to see you. Maybe next year you'll surprise us with something impressive." The smirk on her face ignited something inside me. Enough. Before I knew it, I was standing. The scrape of my chair against the floor silenced the room. Every eye turned toward me, waiting. I hadn't planned to speak, but the words poured out like they'd been waiting for this moment my whole life. "Do you know what they gave me last Christmas?" My voice cut through the silence. "They gave Sabrina a BMW with a red bow. And me?" I held up 2 fingers. $2. That's how much my parents thought I was worth. Gasps rippled across the hall. Vivian's face went white, her lips tightening. "That's not appropriate," she began, but I raised my hand, cutting her off. "No, what's not appropriate is pretending this family is perfect when the truth is rotten. For years, I was treated like nothing, invisible, disposable, and I believed it until I realized something." My voice steadied, stronger now. "I don't need your approval. I don't need your money or your pity or your so-called love, because for the first time, I know my worth. And it's a hell of a lot more than $2. The hall was frozen. Some relatives looked shocked. Others, nodding quietly as if they'd suspected but never dared to say it. Vivian rose, her face twisted in fury. "You will not humiliate us like this." I met her glare head-on. "No, Mother." "I'm done letting you humiliate me." Silence. Heavy, electric. And then, unexpectedly, Lily stood. "She's right," she said firmly, her voice ringing with conviction. "I've seen it all my life, too. Amelia deserves better than the way she's been treated." More murmurs, louder this time, a shift in the air. My parents' control slipping, crumbling under the weight of truth. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking in shame. They were. Later, as the music resumed and whispers spread across the room, Ethan pulled me close on the balcony. "You were incredible," he said, pride shining in his eyes. I exhaled shakily, adrenaline still racing through me. I just couldn't stay silent anymore. He cupped my face gently. "You don't ever have to again." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. The wedding carried on, though the atmosphere had shifted. Laughter returned to the hall, but it was tinged with whispers, with sidelong glances cast toward Vivian and Thomas Carter. The perfect image they had worked so hard to maintain had cracked, and everyone had seen the truth spilling out. Sabrina avoided me the rest of the night, her sequin dress no longer shining as brightly under the weight of silence. She had always thrived when I stayed small, but tonight I hadn't. Tonight I had stolen back my voice, and she didn't know what to do with it. Vivian tried to recover, offering strained smiles, pulling relatives into tight-lipped conversations. But I could see it in her eyes. Fury, embarrassment, fear. She no longer held control. For the first time, I pitied her. Later, when the music softened and guests began to leave, Vivian cornered me near the exit. "You think you won tonight?" she hissed, her voice sharp as glass. "You think a few angry words erase who you are?" I met her stare calmly, no longer the child desperate for her approval. "No, they revealed who I am. And it's not who you tried to make me." Her lips trembled, a crack in her mask of control. "You'll regret this, Amelia. Families stick together. You've chosen to break yours." I stepped closer, my voice steady but cold. Families support one another. Families love without conditions. What we had wasn't family, it was control. And I've broken free for once. She had no reply. I turned and walked away, Ethan at my side, Olivia waiting by the door. With every step, the weight I had carried for 34 years seemed to lift. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp, the stars bright above the city skyline. Ethan slipped his hand into mine, and Olivia looped her arm through my other. "You did it," Olivia whispered, her voice proud. I nodded slowly. "No, we did. I couldn't have gotten here without you." Ethan squeezed my hand. "So what comes next?" I looked out at the horizon, the world wide open, endless. For the first time, the question didn't terrify me. "What comes next," I said with a smile, "is living a life they'll never control again. A life that's mine." As we drove away from the hall, the golden lights shrinking behind us, I felt something I had never known before. Not just freedom, victory. Because my parents had tried to break me, to keep me small, to convince me I was worth less than $2. But tonight, in front of everyone, I had shown them, and myself, that I was worth more than they could ever measure. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.